here at the Alchemist Kitchen, we really, when we have the privilege to have a great teacher and friend, we want to give as much time to Q&A. So we'll leave a good 40 minutes or more for Q&A. What we recommend is you just put a question in the chat if you have something you'd like to ask. Roshina, our programming director, will help moderate. And we're just all here to try and raise our awareness and interest in the power of plants and fungi and the work that Dennis is doing out and about, So we'll just give you a couple of minutes. Dennis, where are you now based out there? In what state? Oregon? Are you?
No, I'm in British Columbia.
British Columbia,
Yeah. Moved up here a couple of years ago in 2019. So, I live in Abbotsford, a community about an hour east of Vancouver.
Nice.
Could not afford to live in Vancouver, so this is as close.
And so
as I could get.
Have you had the same? Have you had that heat experience out there? I mean, that
Yes.
very serious heat change out there, right?
Absolutely. We were in the first heat bubble. In fact, Lytton, British Columbia, about 100 miles north of here, was the hottest place on Earth on that particular day. I think that got up to about 121 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow. And that's north.
The next day, the town burned to the ground.
Oh my gosh.
So and the fires are still very active here. The smoke is not coming down here south so much. It's going east, but we've had several episodes where the smoke has gotten down here, and it's been really bad. And then up in northern, sort of northeastern BC, the fires are raging, and it's not as bad as California, but it's pretty bad. Of course.
Well, it's more new, right? It's more novel to your part of the country of this.
No, not really. Seasonal wildfires have been happening here for a long time, but usually not as bad as California. And of course, it doesn't get the attention that California does, because nothing in Canada gets the attention. But it is bad. It was bad. And but right now we're kind of in a lull period. We expect more heat waves probably before the end of the month. We don't know. I mean, the sooner the better. These fires will burn until October probably.
Yes. Okay, well, why don't we get underway, because we want to respect everybody's time. But I really think that would be great, Dennis, if we could, maybe begin with you just giving a brief, an overview of the current work academically and the research being done at the McKenna Academy, where we are really proud to be, along with our friends at Woven Science, who are one of the sponsors of this event, along with the Alchemist Kitchen. Woven Science is a terrific team of experts and researchers, scientists interested in the advancement of psychedelics for mental health, mental illness, mental wellness. And you'll learn more about Woven Science in the months to come. And of course, the Alchemist Kitchen here in New York. So Dennis, how about a brief overview on the Academy, and then later on get into some of your inspirations and work, will be great.
Okay, Lou, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here in this forum. Thanks especially to Roshina for being the organizer moderator of this. I'm really delighted to see so many people turn out for this. I guess we better keep it interesting, eh? I hope we can do that. See, I'm already sounding like a Canadian. We should keep it interesting. So a lot of you already know about the McKenna Academy, but I can explain a little bit what it is. It's a nonprofit that I founded in 2019 originally, and the subtitle or the subtext of the McKenna Academy is it's the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy. So the idea is that its mission, as you can tell, is basically educational, and we want to focus on kind of the symbiosis, the symbiotic relationship between humans and the rest of the living world, the rest of the sentient biosphere, particularly plants and fungi, particularly the ones that we in this demographic, in this interest area, value so much, the sacred medicines that have been under the stewardship of indigenous people for millennia, really. And they're more important than ever, because they have been allies of our species in our sort of coevolutionary odyssey through time. And we are now getting way out of whack with our relationship with nature, way out of our alignment. And the plant medicines are there to gently and sometimes not so gently nudge us back to at least recognize the dysfunction that we're facing, which is on some level, at some high 30,000 foot level, is at the root of a lot of the problems that we're seeing as the planet, our failure to wake up and deal with this. So the theme of the McKenna Academy is, as I say, education. And when we started it, our idea was that mostly it would be actual conferences in South America and retreats, maybe some in Canada, we weren't sure. And that was the idea, that a big part of it would be organizing these physical events. Well, about the time we got the thing incorporated, COVID came along and said, not so fast, you're not going to be able to do that. So we've been forced to go online and try to develop a strong virtual presence, and have succeeded, more or less. We've been doing various events, and you can check the website out at mckenna.academy or www.mckenna.academy. And if you look at events on that page, you can see some of the events that we've produced and some that are planned. And the basic idea of the Academy is that it's a forum for the free exploration of ideas, and the idea of the mystery school is, we like to, I guess, identify ourselves with the ancient mystery schools of Eleusis and those sorts of institutions, where they were very similar. They were places where people came to learn, but they were also places where people came to have transformative experiences, like Eleusis, for example, where, back in the day when it was active from about 1000 BC to around 400 AD, everyone who was anyone in Greek society, and you didn't have to be an aristocrat, but at some point you made a pilgrimage to Eleusis. And there you had access to their central mystery. It was a mystery school, and that involved the consumption of a beverage that there's reasonable reason to think that it was probably prepared from ergotized barley. And people had a transformative experience that they were not supposed to talk about. That was a mystery. But this was often the highlight of a person's life back in Greek society at that time. So in that spirit, the Academy was founded. But there were other things going on at the Academy besides just, ritual sacraments and so on. Many in this audience are already familiar with Brian Murarescu's new book called The Immortality Key. which has been out for a few months, and that kind of delves into the origins of the psychedelic mystery schools, of which Eleusis was only one. It's a very interesting book. The scholarship is good. There are a lot of holes. There's a lot of questions that are not answered. But if you're interested in that, the sort of potential role of psychedelics in the Western traditions, his book is a good place to start. As well, of course, of there was the book of that was put out called The Road to Eleusis in 1978, written by R. Gordon Wasson and Albert Hoffman, the inventor, discoverer of LSD, and Carl Ruck, who was a classic scholar. And they were the first time that this idea that the Eleusis was organized around a psychedelic mystery. And of course, that was totally dismissed and ridiculed at the time by the conventional, scholarship establishment. But in fact, there is good evidence for it. And Brian sort of delved into that. So the McKenna Academy we think of it as the 20th century reflection of the Eleusinian mystery schools.
The Eleusis was the meetings. The purpose of the meetings was connection, right? And
yes,
a sense of connection. I think I recall also that there was a sense of starting to talk about immortality and life. People were concerned about death and different issues, but
right.
And so because the mysteries were the mysteries because they weren't well documented, the conversations, or how did the term the mysteries become associated with those gatherings?
Well, because I think they were mystery schools. I don't know if they would have referred to themselves that way, but they were mystery schools because this was secret knowledge, basically. And it was not something that was open to everyone, and the idea was that you were, it was esoteric knowledge, and people that went to Eleusis and had these experiences were admonished, don't talk about this. You're not supposed to talk about this. Of course, like anywhere else, there were leaks, in fact, and and there was an episode, I think, in around the 4th century BC. There was one person who was a member of the Eleusinian mystery cult. I think his name was Alcibiades, and he actually stole the sacrament from the temple and took it home with him, and was actually having essentially acid parties at home. And he was vilified and ostracized, of course, expelled from the academy. But why that's interesting is that it demonstrated that whatever the mystery was, as far as Eleusis was concerned, you could put it in a bottle, and you could walk out of the temple and take it home and use it recreationally. So although scholarships have denied that, sort of, again, it's this dynamic between the accepted scholarship about these institutions and the esoteric position, but the official position, they don't talk about Eleusis as a psychedelic mystery school, but in fact, there's good evidence that that's exactly what was going on.
Right? They drank what's it called? Kikian?
The Kukion, it was called. The Kukion. Yeah.
It was a type of barley and mint with some psychoactive mushroom, right? Something like that, right?
Probably, it's not clear. This is where it becomes hard to clear it up. But the thinking is it was barley. It was made from barley. We know that much. And the thinking, at least, when Road to Eleusis came out, was that it was made from ergotized barley. It was made with barley that had been affected by ergot, which is the source of the lysergic acid derivative. So LSD is a derivative of ergot alkaloids. LSD itself is not natural, but it's a tweak of a natural alkaloid which is found in ergot. And like all these things, there are layers and layers of complexity. For example, there are different strains of ergot. Ergot, as such, claviceps purpurea, which we usually think of as ergot, is rather toxic. Many of the ergolines, as this class of alkaloids are called, are quite toxic. They're vasoconstrictors. They can cause gangrene and this sort of thing. But some of them are also psychoactive. So the thinking was that some of the strains of ergot that they may have been using were, non-toxic strains, essentially, or less toxic strains. And then they put it through a very simple chemical process that also separated the psychoactive fraction from the more toxic fraction. Just basically the fact that the psychoactive component was water soluble. So they essentially just made a water macerate of the ergot and then filtered that, and that got rid of most of the nasty stuff. This is speculation, but that's probably how they did it.
Well, I mean, it's certainly an inspiration that we should imagine, everyone, that we should probably come up at the Alchemist Kitchen with an elixir in honor of the McKenna Academy and put it on the menu some form,
Well, let's talk offline about that, Lou, because there are some issues here.
Yeah. No worries.
But yeah, it's a great idea.
But then the Academy is also now you're hosting some conferences and classes, right? So there's also might you talk a little bit about our shared interest in what's going on in the Amazon and reparation, and how we raise awareness to everyone to what is going on that side, which the Academy is quite dedicated to raising awareness to, right?
Right. That's something I did. There are several things the Academy is getting involved in that I did want to discuss in this forum, just to bring people up to date with what we're up to. Before I forget it, or while we're talking about this, I want to mention that we are going to offer, starting September, we're going to offer a graduate level course in ethnobotany, which is one of our priorities, and we're doing that in collaboration with an organization. It's called the Organization for Tropical Studies, and they're based in Costa Rica, and we're going to present this online course in ethnobotany. Many people have written me and said, well, you're an academy, right? So where can I sign up? How can I enroll? Well, this will be the first actual formal course that we've offered. So it'll be like I think it's about an 11-week course, and it will be rigorous. It will have a lot of information. It's not, it will require the people make the commitment, but we have many guest lecturers lined up, some of them well-known, some of them not so well-known, but all on the cutting edge of the sort of state of ethnobotany. So we're going to be offering that course in September. We're in the process of mounting a fundraising campaign, with the capital campaign, which of course we have to do. That's what nonprofits have to do if they're going to stay afloat. So we are launching that capital campaign. And if you're in this forum, you're undoubtedly, not necessarily undoubtedly, but you can sign up for the newsletter at the Academy and keep informed about what that's doing.
Let's make sure we put those websites in the chat, so people who might be interested in the graduate course, continuing education.
Yeah, you can. All this we haven't actually. We're going to start advertising the ethnobotany course next week. I think that's planned. But here's the website for the academy.
Website.
And in the Amazon, we've got a number of things going on. Our biggest project actually is in the Amazon, even though we're not in the Amazon right now. But we have a project which we call Biognosis, or the Knowledge Preservation Project. And this is a long-term project that has a couple of phases, actually 2 or 3 phases to it. The first one is to make a short documentary, basically, about the gentleman that I've worked with in the Amazon for over 40 years. His name is Juan Ruiz, and he happens to be the curator of the herbarium at the university in Iquitos. It's the university is called the UNAP, the Universidad Nacional Amazonia de la Paraguana. Juan has been the curator of this herbarium for some years. I first worked with him when we were both graduate students, and now he has become the curator. And what's interesting about Juan is he is a walking library. He's one of these people about which it's sometimes said, when a medicine man dies, it's as though a library has burned down. And Juan is that library, and very much like that, it's all in his head. He has vast knowledge of the Amazonian flora, particularly in this area of Loreto, where Iquitos is located. And he's not a guy that writes things down. It's all in his head.
Wow.
So we want to document some of that knowledge that he has before he, he's not getting any younger. None of us are getting any younger. He is a few years younger than I am, but we're both getting up there, and it's important that we try to preserve his knowledge. So the first thing we're going to do is make the short documentary about him and what he's doing, and kind of the general situation down there. And then we're hoping that documentary can be leveraged to get funding to do a 5 to 10 part documentary series about the current state of ethnomedicine and ethnobotany in the Amazon. Kind of what is the current situation post-COVID, post-ayahuasca tourism, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
These traditions don't go away, they just change.
Yeah.
And
is there a methodology? When you imagine documenting someone where their history is in their mind, the actual methodology, is it they talk and it's written down, or are there protocols, I guess, in which that information would be?
Well, I guess there are protocols. This is kind of new to us. We haven't done this, but we're relying on videography, basically. This is going to be a video documentation project. There may be transcripts, but it's basically relying on video. And we have some excellent collaborators on this. One of the person that is doing the actual filming, the videographer for the project, is a man named Luis Solarat, who used to be Brian Rose's producer. He produced a movie called Reconnect, which some of you may be familiar with. It was filmed at Salterra. So he's a key figure involved in making this video. And then we're working with a company in New Brunswick called Hemmings House, and they are basically their shtick is doing documentaries of all kinds. So they've been in this business for a while. So we have some real expertise here.
And that on the website, is there, for people that are more interested in that area, is there there's information on the website if you want to participate?
Yes, I believe there is. If you search on, I think the search term is
far from the far side, view from
calling
the
it.
side.
Well, that's the blog. I don't know if you'll find it there, but if you search on Bionosis, which I think I have spelled correctly there,
yeah,
then something will come up on the website. But
that's great.
That's a long-term project. The third phase of it, if we get these two done, then the third phase is even more ambitious and will cost more money, but it will be well worthwhile, which is to digitize the UNAP herbarium, digitize this herbarium at the university. Many of the specimens in the herbarium, there's about 100,000 specimens. Half of them aren't even mounted yet. So this will be a project to get those specimens mounted, labeled, all the collection information associated with each specimen, and then digitize the whole thing. Maybe even create a VR version of this. We've talked in our kind of, fantasizing about this, that we could create a kind of a virtual rainforest, that where these specimens would be sort of, dotted throughout this virtual rainforest. And when people went to a specimen, they could, click it, pull up the collection data, see where it's distributed, and then link into other databases like ethnobotanical databases, genomics, phytochemical, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the idea, is that, this herbarium at this third world university, is a kind of a scientific gem. It's got a lot of deficiencies, obviously not a huge budget, none of that, but as a resource for science, anyone with an interest in Amazonian flora, for whatever reason, it could be a very valuable resource. So we want to essentially take that under the wing of the Academy and administrate it and give it a very active online presence, and create a situation where people can visit this virtual herbarium and find out what's there, and this is, I've always liked collections. The idea of collecting information is, something that's important in science, is just the collecting of information. And I've always felt that every time you can attach information to a plant, you have provided a reason not to drive it into extinction. Every plant is good for something. Even the ones we call weeds are good for, they have a virtual, I think it was, I forget if it was Ralph Waldo Emerson or Longfellow or one of those people, but he said, a weed is a plant whose virtue has yet to be recognized.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think there's truth to that.
Yeah.
So that project is.
Sure, I'm sorry to cut you off. I want to just encourage, really encourage any questions. We'll start to field questions. We're really here to try and facilitate some connection between you guys out in the audience and Dennis, and feel comfortable to talk to any topic. I think that I think those pursuits are, those go, there's something about the collection of the information and herbs and realizing that sometimes when you feel that connection, you really are creating an opportunity for the future generations to have a chance to honor that history. And we certainly don't, I think that's really always been a very big part of Dennis's commitment, is, the future is also to be able to look back on the history of plants and Why don't we're starting to get some, I want, one question I'll ask is,
Okay.
as a young man, what were the elements that inspired you to pursue a career in ethnobiology? And just it's always interesting for people to understand where was that influence, or motivations, and were they well thought out, or just, they suddenly came upon you?
No, I don't know. I don't know if you look back that far. I don't know that maybe some people can say, I had my life planned out from the start and I knew exactly where I was going. I was not that person. I was just a kind of a nerdy kid. I was interested in science. I was interested. I mean, my earliest passion was actually astrophysics and astronomy, and that's what I was interested in. But in general, I was interested in science and curious about everything. And of course, my brother, Terence McKenna, was a big influence, and he was 4 years older than I am. So he led me down the primrose path in many ways, but no regrets. He was always that much further ahead in terms of what was hot, what was breaking news, and so on. And so together we kind of explored this area of psychedelics. And, he went to Berkeley. He went to California before I'd even graduated from high school. He went to California to finish his last 2 years of high school. And of course, he fell in immediately with a bunch of, really smart, but really radical, crazy people. And they filled his head with lots of funny ideas. And in turn, he filled my head with funny ideas. This was not an age when there was no text, there was no email, you could write letters, but basically I used to wait for him to come back for Christmas vacation, and for summer, he'd spend a couple weeks in the summertime with us back in Paonia, Colorado, this tiny town that we lived in. And it was like, an explorer returning from the ends of the earth, essentially, with tales to tell. And really that is what it was. So he got me interested in that. We were both steeped in science fiction, probably to an unhealthy degree. But we were steeped in science fiction, and we can blame my father for that. My father was a very conventional person. He was really invested in being just one of the guys. The problem is he wasn't just one of the guys. And I used to fight with him about this because I'd say, you're not an average person. You're actually fairly intelligent, and you're interested in interesting things. Like he was a pilot. He had his own plane. And some of our earliest, some of my best memories from my teenage years was, that we bonded over flying together. And he was an incredible pilot. And, but he also liked to read science fiction. And he would leave these things around, and he read Fate magazine. He traveled for a living. He was gone most of the week, so he had to have something to read while he was on the road. So he'd pick up this Fate magazine, which is still going strong, by the way. And it was talking about, aliens and paranormal stuff and UFOs and all of this stuff, and occasionally even about drugs. They had articles about mescaline, and they had I remember they had one article about the Peruvian dream juice or whatever. So it was
there was a connection. I'm gonna have to go to some questions though, because we got some backup.
Okay. What's our time frame? I thought we were
good. We're good.
Okay.
I'm just going to read this one. It's just from Andreas. he says, the experiment of La Carrera 50 years ago changed the world. In retrospective, do you see a connection between the history of the Witoto people with the rubber industry and the fact that those particular Cubanists reproduced by Terence ended up distributed all over the globe, creating an impulse towards biognosis. You're going to have to keep that answer short because we have a lot of questions.
Well, so what is the question exactly?
Do you see a connection between the history of the people, I guess, studied the Witoto?
Witoto people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
People. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. Not really. I mean, in other words, it was kind of an accident in a way that we went to La Chorrera. We went to La Chorrera not searching for psilocybe cubensis, but for searching for a Witoto psychedelic called ukuhe, an orally active preparation made from Varroa species. And La Chorrera happened to be the ancestral home of the Witoto. So when this article came out, Schultes published an article about this. When it came out, we thought this is what we thought this was the secret because it was an orally active form of DMT. And that's why we went to La Chorrera. And then when we got to La Chorrera, our priorities changed because the psilocybe mushrooms, psilocybe cubensis, were everywhere in this pasture around the mission statement that was La Chorrera. And so people are familiar with the whole crazy La Chorrera story. But yes. Long story short, there was no real connection with the Witoto people other than that we had come, to their village and looking for their medicine and ended up finding this other thing. They had no interest, they had no tradition of use of mushrooms at all. I mean, we were not part of their cultural milieu at all. And that wasn't really our agenda or theirs, but just happened to be that's why we were at La Chorrera.
I have a question. Thank you so much, Dennis. I have a question from Thano. Dennis, do you believe there is a difference in the experience from a synthetic molecule versus a molecule extracted from plant material?
Basically, no, I don't. I think that synthetic molecules, synthetic psilocybin, for example, produces an experience that's just about the same as mushrooms. There may be slight differences, but not to speak of. I don't say there's, molecules are molecules, and whether they're synthetic, synthesized and taken in a pure form or part of an extract, the effect is pretty much the same. It's important to remind people that there is no such thing as an unnatural molecule because nothing is outside of nature. And even synthetic molecules are made by all natural organic chemists, right? So they just get there by a different...
that's very interesting. Wow. Yeah, no, that's a good... Well, I guess there's a, but besides the motivations, drug development, or, with synthetic molecules, would you agree that in the interest of perhaps using them for the treatment of mental health, there's more consistency in the output than maybe what you'd get from plant material? I mean, more control over the actual creation of the product itself.
Yeah, the products themselves. I mean, these clinical studies, the FDA likes synthetic molecules precisely because you can control the composition, the purity, the dose, and all that stuff. So they tend to look more favorably on synthetic molecules for these very tightly controlled FDA approved clinical trials. There's no reason why natural preparations like mushroom extracts can't be made to standards. I mean, the technology exists. You find it in the herbal products industry all the time, where it's easy to make a standardized extract or preparation of herbal medicines, and the same methodologies can be used to make a standardized psychedelic medicine. But there's nothing inherently superior about a natural as opposed to a synthetic, other than perhaps the association in our minds. Maybe we feel better if we know that our medicine came from a cow pie than a test tube. But some people prefer one or the other, and it doesn't really make that much difference.
All right, here's a question from Dominic. He says, do you think he's talking a bit about virtual reality, augmented reality, and the opportunities we have going forward to put people, I think, into the experience, or be able to have a more immersive experience with or without the accompaniment of psychedelics. But his interest is, do you think, Dennis, do you think a more artistic sort of recreational approach to psychedelics might push us through the door faster as a society? Wouldn't you agree? Most people take life too seriously because of a lack of some of these more fantastic experiences. And that therefore, I'm just adding, in a COVID, in a reality of pandemics that we're going to probably have to live with for a while, how do we maybe find a way where the artistic side, having fun with some of these
I think I think what the questioner is asking or wanting to address is, does it all have to be about curing? Does it have to be about these things are used for different mental illnesses and that's one use, right? And that's the use that a lot of these companies are based on, and that's certainly the use that the FDA is resonant to. They don't want to necessarily approve clinical studies for recreational use, although the thing is, in fact, it's a it's a fine line. You can't really make a strict separation between therapeutic use and recreational use. It's all about how you structure the experience, and there's nothing inherently wrong with having fun. People should not necessarily look at it as something that you shouldn't be having fun. We should all have more fun in our lives, whether psychedelically assisted or not. So there's nothing. The important thing is that you approach it thoughtfully in terms of how you structure your experience, and make sure that the environment is safe. The therapists and everyone else with experience with psychedelics talk about set and setting. These are the big two variables that Leary talked about way back in the day. The set is your mindset. The set is what you bring to the experience, which effectively can be not only your expectations, but everything you've learned in your life. You are the set. And then you have to couple that with the right setting. And the setting is important. It has to be, number one, it has to be safe. That's the chief thing. And number two, it has to be conducive to whatever kind of experience you're seeking. But you can certainly have a recreational experience that's also spiritually profound, and therapeutic. These things are not separate things. If you look at the word recreation, split it apart, and it becomes recreation. So in a certain sense, psychedelic experience are recreating. And that's sort of the point. one takes them to for transformation, and learning and spiritual development or psychological development. So they can be very regenerating. I mean, I think this is one thing about psychedelics in general. They are a kind of a reset on the neurochemical level. They're a reset of the serotonin system, literally like rebooting your computer. It's very similar. It gets rid of a lot of kludge, and in your computer and in our heads as we get into these like habitual behavior patterns that are maybe not so useful. And so I don't think you can strictly make a distinction between recreational use. It can be valuable in that way. And also, but again, it depends on how you structure the set and setting, what your intention is, what the purpose of doing the experiment is.
One question we have, actually, this is a question I think even Roshina is asking, was, in back in the day, was psychedelics used to build community? The engagement in the use of psychoactive plants prior to colonialism, right? And then which I guess gave birth to a lot more warfare and conflict. Are there records or history of the use of plants and fungi for community building, building strength within a community?
Well, sure. I mean, this is largely the way that they're used in indigenous communities. And these mystery schools that we talked about, that was very much a collective sharing of the experience. So for people to get together in a group and have these utterly transformative experiences, it has much more power if that's done in a group setting. And traditionally, the way that psychedelics have been used indigenously, it's all about the group. I mean, psychedelics are healing medicines. I often say they're healing medicines, but they work on the individual level, they work on the social level and the local level, they work on the societal level and even at the species level. They work on multiple levels of human institutions. But if you look at something like ayahuasca, the way that ayahuasca is utilized by traditional people, or the way peyote is even a better example, I mean, these are group experiences, definitely. I think that there are a few people that would say, you should go off and take ayahuasca by yourself or take peyote by yourself. Not that you couldn't benefit from that. I'm just saying that that's the perception, that they tend to be used in social settings, and definitely have a lot to do with social solidarity. And like in South America, ayahuasca has become kind of iconically associated. It's not separate from politics at all. It's associated with the indigenous traditions that's trying to hold back and preserve them in the face of globalization and all the threats to these communities, their habitats, obviously the plants in those habitats. I mean, ayahuasca is a very political thing now because it's a statement. It's sort of putting a stake in the ground, in favor of the preservation of species, indigenous knowledge, and that kind of thing.
I have a question from Colin Gomez. Hi, Dennis. I read your intro to the new edition of Food of the Gods today. I was curious about your use of the word consciousness and quote unquote minded as a unique property of humans. perhaps would you not use the term consciousness to describe the mental life of any non-human, such as animals? Or is it distinctively see it as a human trait?
No. I wouldn't say that. I think that there's a degree of consciousness in. Well, I'm basically a panpsychist, so I believe there's a degree of consciousness in everything, even the electron. I'm a person that thinks that consciousness is built in to the structure of reality at every fundamental level. So that maybe that's kind of a cop-out, but I do think that animals and plants, for that matter, and fungi, bacteria, all of these things do have a kind of intelligence, and it's not maybe intelligence, the kind of intelligence that we have, but it depends on how you define intelligence. And I like to define intelligence as or evidence of intelligence as something that achieves an optimum adaptation to its environment. That requires intelligent, behavior. And I think that plants and animals and fungi all do that. So that's a kind of an intelligence. I think human consciousness is somewhat, I'm getting hiccups here. Talking too fast. I think that human consciousness is unique in the sense that it enables us to construct an interior representation of reality. I sometimes call this the reality hallucination. In neuroscience, it's now called the default mode network. But I think that the ability to sort of create a model of reality that we inhabit, that we live in, and that is something that the human brain can do. That's what it's set up to do. And I don't think animals do that. I mean, we can't ask them because they don't have language, but we do have language, and we know that fundamental sort of characteristic of human consciousness is this association of sound and image, meaningless sounds that would be essentially meaningless, like all this stuff I'm spewing forth right now would be meaningless, except that in the hearer, these words are associated with some significance, and usually very often a visual representation. And this is something that psychedelics do, like in the food of the gods. That's the whole idea, was that the mushrooms taught us to visualize and associate meaning with sound and images. Without meaning, sounds are just sounds, images are images. But if you bring those things together and you actually experience a significance associated with them, that's the basis of human consciousness. And I don't think animals do that. That's what makes human consciousness unique.
Thank you so much, Dennis. We have time for a couple more questions. This is an easy one, I guess. Dennis, have you ever tried amanita mushrooms?
Yes, I've tried them. Once was enough for me. I tried them many years ago when I was living in Boulder, Colorado. I was a graduate student at the University of Colorado. And actually, Terrence happened to be living there at that time. And we went up into the mountains behind Flatiron. We found many specimens of these big, beautiful Amanita muscaria. And we brought them back to the house, and being completely ignorant of what we were doing, we just ate 3 or 4 of these fresh mushrooms, and the caps were, the size of dinner plates. And I was much more reckless in those days. I mean, I'm just telling you, I would never have done that had I known the things I know now. But it was okay. It was not that interesting. It was rough. It was because there was actually a fair bit of the muscarine type effects. So chills and sweating, salivation and all that. And then it kind of settled down into a state of, it was like I drunk a quart of cheap wine. It was kind of like a cheap drunk, and that was the last I ever really seriously tried to get in. Well, that wasn't even serious. That was totally experimental and casual, more than it should have been. But I never got into it after that. Now, I understand there are ways to prepare it, which we did none of that make it much more like a psychedelic. But, the chemistry of Amanita muscaria is hard to rationalize. There are no tryptamines in it. There's, serotonergic medicine, compounds at all. It's all about GABA, the GABA receptor, which is the same receptor that alcohol interacts with, and things like kava and things like benzodiazepine tranquilizers. All of these things target the GABA receptor, the gamma aminobutyric acid receptor. So it's hard for me to accept that Amanita muscaria is part of these spiritual traditions that obviously involve a transcendent psychedelic like psilocybin. I mean, I know there's historical indications of it, but I'm a little puzzled by that. I think there's work to be done on the chemistry of Amanita.
I want to just say, we're just about out of time, and to all of you that took the effort to listen in today, and the many of you who maybe intended to, there is a recording. It'll go out to, the hundreds of people that have signed up. We're in a time where, I like to have the expression, everybody's a shaman, and it's very important to begin to separate the pretenders from the sources of knowledge, the authorities. And the McKenna Academy, it's not about Dennis. It's about the knowledge and trust that Dennis has created over his career. And so he's a magnet for a whole new generation. There are the elders, of course, but there's a whole new generation of young people who are figuring out ways to study, to be immersed in the experience. And I can't say enough, being a founder of the Alchemist Kitchen and meeting so many people, you have to choose where you get your information, where you get your knowledge. And please, I want to give Dennis a few minutes to just finish up, but the McKenna Academy is a trust agent. So when you donate, when you take a class, when you participate, when you buy a book, you're helping to support the difference between the tendency to pretend, to commercialize, to take advantage, with those who are trying to be preservationist and authoritative. And I really wanted to make that thought. Go ahead, Dennis, you finish up with us and give us your last thoughts, as we try to close out this very quick session, but hopefully we'll do another.
Okay, yes, I'd love to come back. So you mentioned good sources of information. Certainly, that's what the McKenna Academy wants to be. We want to be a forum, but we want to represent, good sources of information. We're open to a wide range of ideas and discussion in the spirit of the mystery schools, where pretty much anything could be brought up for discussion. And if the ideas are completely, not meritless, then they will be identified and denounced. But there's a core of validity in almost all good ideas. So we want it to be a forum for learning and particularly for self-learning, we're standing, on the, we're putting our gauntlet down on the side of curiosity. That's what the mystery is. The mystery is everything. The mystery is basically the miracle of our existence in this marvelous world. That's kind of the mindset of the Academy, and that's the spirit we'd like people to come and experience. I wanted to mention just a couple other sources of what I call good information. Most of you are familiar with them, but arrowwood.org is a favorite. It's an online source for information about psychoactive substances of all kinds. They have tremendous archives about psychedelics, and they're a solid outfit. If you want a crash course, in psychopharmacology, or if you're thinking of taking a particular substance that you haven't taken before, you want to get a quick snapshot of what it might be like, arrowwood.org is your go-to place. And that is... and then another organization that I always like to promote is ICERS.org, which has an ethnobotanical orientation. Yeah, ICERS stands for the International Center for Ethnobotanical Education, Research, and Service. And their orientation is very much toward plant medicines, preserving them. They address all aspects, and they've kind of focused on primarily on ayahuasca and iboga, but they're also, it's not a place where you necessarily go to learn about how to use these things or prepare them. But if you're interested in the legal and cultural aspects of iboga and ayahuasca, ICERS.org is a great organization. They do wonderful work. They've created a ayahuasca legal defense fund because sometimes practitioners go to other countries, they take ayahuasca and not really knowing whether it's legal or not, and then they get in trouble with the law, and ICERS helps these people out. But they do much more. They organize a world ayahuasca forum every 2 or 3 years. The last one in Girona, Spain, in 2019 had 2,500 people. So it's a very active organization. I'm on the board, which is not what makes it a great organization. The honor is mine to be on the board, but I very much respect what ICERS is doing. So another organization you should know about. And then another one I don't have to tell you about, because here we are, the Alchemist Kitchen. And
we're here in New York. We're ready to
lovely to be associated with it. Yeah, many good friends there.
We appreciate you so much. Guys, have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much for coming. And we look forward to hosting another talk with Dennis in the future, and check our event schedule. We got good stuff happening. All right.
Thank you, Lou. Thank everybody.
Up there, Dennis. Stay hydrated.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
I'll say hello and I'll say goodbye. Thank all of you for participating.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.